Good morning, everyone. We'll just wait for a bit, maybe another minute before we start. We see attendees are still joining. Thanks for joining us. Cool. I guess we can start now. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining for this webinar for this month. Some of you have been our regular attendees. Thanks for joining us again. And the title of our webinar for this month is The Ultimate Showdown, Cyber Resilience versus Cyber Protection. You might have seen the EDM that we've been sending. Unfortunately, this is not a boxing match because the image that we've been showing is like two boxing gloves. So this is not a boxing match. So we'll be discussing more about, what's the difference of cyber resiliency versus cyber protection. In the past couple of webinars, we've been doing Cisco security, different Cisco security solution, and we want to have a different approach this month by giving you guys a bit of more knowledge of what's happening in the market right now, both locally in New Zealand and also globally. At the same time, also giving you, the difference of cyber resiliency and cyber protection. We're here. Actually, we have three speakers for you guys for this session. So this is really exciting. We have Jan Thornborough and Wendy Bennett from Outfox, and we have Corien Vermaak from Cisco. I'll be giving a bit of introduction of what they do and what their background is later. So I guess we have a lot to unpack for this webinar. We'll start first with Outfox, and then after that, we'll have Corrine presenting something about its security in Cisco. And lastly, we'll give everyone a chance for a Q&A. So before we start, just a couple of things. We'll be recording the session, and we'll be sharing the recording after the webinar, so you can share it to your sales team or to any of your colleagues who you think would be benefiting from this session. And also, if you have any questions, feel free to send it on the chat box. It's on the right bottom side of your screen or right side of the screen. So yeah, feel free to ask anything in particular about cybersecurity. So yeah, I guess we can start now. So first, I'd like to introduce Outfox. So we're joined here by Jan Thornborough, the founder of Outfox, and her business partner, Wendy Bennett. So
Hi.
Outfox, yeah, sorry.
No, you're right.
Oh, okay, cool. So Outfox is an award-winning cyber resiliency company dedicated to helping small and medium businesses here in New Zealand, and also not-for-profit organizations to become more cyber resilient. So John is an experienced cyber resilience expert. Prior to setting up Outfox, John was head of the cyber resilience unit at New Zealand's National Cybersecurity Center, helping nationally significant organizations become more cyber resilient. Wendy Bennett has experience working in both the public and private sectors. She has also held information security leadership roles with the National Cybersecurity Center, largely focused on the development of policy, standards, and guidance for the New Zealand public sector until she joined Jan at the Outfox a couple of years ago. So I'll hand over the presentation, the floor to Jan. Jan?
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you very much to Entelar for letting us present today. Our specialisation is cyber resilience, so I'd like to talk a little bit about that. So, cyber resilience is an approach to doing business these days. It's no longer just a set and forget thing that you can put in place and then forget about it. Cyber resilience has to be integrated into your whole business, and it helps you stay ahead of the pack when it comes to cybercrime. but it's also about helping you achieve a competitive advantage as well. So at Outfox, we help businesses, small and large, to become more cyber resilient. So today we're going to discuss how you can be more cyber resilient at work and at home, and uh, what adopting a way of business of doing cyber resilience means in practical terms. So we're going to look at who's doing the attacking and why, and then we'll discuss with you how you can improve your cyber resilience. But it's always important to actually understand, first off, where you actually are on the journey of cyber resilience within your own organization. So what we found from our experience and from our research has validated it, is that all businesses fall somewhere on this continuum. So where would you place yourself on this curve? So at the far right hand side, we've got she'll be right. I don't need to worry about my cybersecurity because uh, I've never been attacked before, so I don't think I'm going to get attacked now. And then further up the chain is, oh, someone's going to bail me out. So if I have a cybersecurity problem, my IT provider is going to step in and everything's going to be all right. We tend to call these two areas the Russian roulette approach to cyber resilience, because you're relying on someone else to bail you out if there's a problem. Now, we're all working in a digital environment these days, and it's important to know what your responsibilities are as an organization to getting yourself out of a hole if you do get caught with a cyber attack. The people at the higher end of the scale, so the fighters and the ones that are reset for growth, these are organizations that actually understand that you have to be cyber resilient to be able to operate on the internet, just to be able to do your day-to-day business. Most businesses rely on computing and computers, and if they were to go down or be offline for a week or even months, then that would have a massive impact on your business. So unfortunately, most of the businesses that we operate sit around about here. So they're sort of in between. Someone will bail us out, so our IT provider is going to help us, versus they've actually taken steps to become a bit more proactive and taking a shared responsibility in the future for their cyber resilience. So it really is important for you to understand where you're on the bell curve, because of the fact that you're doing business digitally these days and it's the norm. And you want to have peace of mind that your organization is operating in a safe and secure manner. But, a lot of people say, but I haven't been attacked yet, so surely it's not as big a problem as everyone says. Well, back in 2015, when I first started in cybersecurity, they were predicting that cybercrime was going to cost the world about 5 billion in lost GDP by 2016. Fast forward to about 2020, when the pandemic was starting, and the predictions changed, and they said, oh, okay, we think by 2025 we're going to have lost about 10.5 trillion to cybercrime around the world. Well, last year, 2023, the FBI reported we had our worst year yet. They actually lost 12 trillion, so that was 2 years early, and 2 trillion more. And now the predictions are that by 2027, there's the World Economic Forum predicted at the start of this year that they think that the globe is going to lose around about 23.4 trillion to lost GDP as a result of cybercrime. And there's a number of factors that have caused this, but it's mainly due to the pandemic. So you will recall, during the pandemic, most people turned online, whether for their work or their personal lives, and it's created a lot more opportunities for cyber criminals to exploit it. As we get more and more advanced, and as new technologies are coming on board as well, so things like artificial intelligence, the attackers are taking advantage of that as well, and they're using those sorts of things against us. And there's just more tools, and very easy to use tools available for scammers, and I'll talk a little bit about them a bit later in the presentation. But the pandemic saw a particular shift in cyber attacks, because a lot of people had to go and work remotely very quickly, and sometimes their setups were not always set up to the same level of security as they might have had in their offices. So a lot of people have moved to cloud-based IT environments, and it's given cyber criminals a much greater opportunity to have a crack at them if they're not set up properly, if they haven't gone with a good IT company to help them provide those services, such as Cisco and Entelar. So from the last slide, we know that there's been the losses are predicted to over double in the next 3 years. So let's just do a bit of future predicting around this trend. So, so there's our cybercrime prediction. If you're investing in cybersecurity measures these days, and you're thinking, okay, well, we've got a budget and we're going to maybe do a bit of security awareness training, and perhaps then we'll just carry on investing the way we've always done. By the time you hit 2027, you're actually going to be going backwards in terms of your security and your ability to resist the cybercrime, because the cybercrime is going to be going up exponentially. And of course, if you don't invest at all well, you're actually going to be a lot more vulnerable by 2027. So what we're recommending is that you consider having a regular investment and a regular updates to your cybersecurity, so that you can at least keep track of the amount of crime that's coming. Now, the interesting about this futures chart is that today is the only day where all three lines here are the closest. So, and all you really have to do is make a decision about which path you want to take. And in order to understand why being cyber resilient is essential in today's digital marketplace, let's look at what happens when a cyber attack actually occurs. So you'll all be familiar with the old iceberg model. Often, as we know, the stuff that's above the waterline is only about a fraction of the story. So when you get attacked, it's a bit like having a heart attack for your business. You use connectivity to all your computer systems. You might lose the information of your customers. Your staff are going to get overworked because you're trying to recover from the attack. And if you're not prepared, if you don't have good processes and systems in place, then you're going to be running around trying to recover. So some of the typical things we see, obviously, are loss of confidence in your network security. So you can't really trust your computer system because you don't really know when the attacker got in there in the first place. You may have lost sensitive information. There's going to be some kind of downtime, whether it's a day, a week, or even months. We've seen organizations such as like DHB, they took 5 months to recover from their cyber attack. Of course, loss of reputation is a big one. So can you imagine that, it's taken you 20 years to build your reputation, and then it's lost literally overnight, or it's halved overnight because customers lose confidence in you because you've lost their information, or you can't deliver on their orders, things like that. And then you might want to try and find out how the hack occurred so you can prevent it from happening again. Often attackers these days will sit in your systems for days, weeks, even months before they launch an attack. And it's really important to understand how they got in and when they got in, so that you can confidently recover from your backups. But as we said, under the surface, there's a whole bunch of other impacts to your business. So extortion payments. So if you've been ransomed, well, they're going to be after you for a ransom payment. If you pay, you then get on their gold members list, and they know that you're a good payer, so they're liable to actually come back and hit you again at some point, or they'll sell your details off to someone else in the dark web for them to have a crack as well. But then there's also things like damages to data and programs. There are new attacks these days that can actually, we say they brick your computers, so they can actually turn your computer into a brick, because they wipe it and you can't actually reinstall it or recover it. You just have to throw it away and get a new one. This is quite common malware that's over in the likes of the Ukraine-Russia war at the moment. So it's only a matter of time before that gets out more widespread. Other things you could have personal information tampered with, and of course there's going to be a loss of income and extra expenses to remedy the situation. So it's much better to be preventative. Then prevention is always better than the cure. So, but in order to be able to put that in place, it's important to understand actually who's doing the attacking on your organisation. So, Wendy, do you want to talk about the attackers?
Thanks, Jan. Rather than mucking around trying to share, can I just get you to keep hitting the button? Thank you. All right. So after that, it's really easy for us all to feel a sense of despair, but we encourage you at Outfox to get mad, I guess, and not get even. And we can do...
It's the other way around, isn't it, Wendy?
Oh, sorry. No, to not get mad, but to get even, sorry. And we can all do it if we adopt a different way of thinking by implementing simple cybersecurity, resilience practices. So to do this, first we've got to understand, and I'm going to fly through this, the different types of attackers that are out there, what they want in their motivations, what needs to be protected, and how we might want to become more cyber resilient. Next slide, please, Jan. So cybercrime has evolved and it's become more organised and sophisticated over the years, and the stereotype of kids sitting in basements and hoodies, so what we in our world call script kiddies, is very much diminishing. It's now really big business. It's a low-cost, high-return industry, and there's also little risk of getting caught. So there are three main types of cyber criminals, and the first I'm going to talk about today is state-sponsored. These guys are genuinely military units acting on probably the instructions of their governments, and they're looking to steal information, spy on other nations, and disrupt their critical services. And some of the more well-known guys you're seeing on screen at the moment, North Korea, China, Russia, and Iran. Their attacks are really sophisticated and they are quite stealthy, so they can sit quietly in networks for a long period of time and can be quite difficult to detect. As Jan said, we've seen them in systems for up to 3 years sometimes. They are usually targeted attacks, very targeted on specific countries, and they're launched by really well-trained teams. And also back to Jan's point, nowadays they use cyber crime as a warfare tactic because it's much cheaper than launching physical warfare as we see it in today's world. And if the state-sponsored actor wants to get into your system, no matter who they are, they will. And I don't want you to be fooled. State-sponsored actors just don't go after governments at all. They go after critical infrastructure within countries and organisations and businesses to disrupt services and steal information. At the moment, they're still quite big on disrupting research organisations as well. Jen, next slide, please. The second type of cyber criminals that I'd like to talk about today is just that, cyber criminals. So cyber criminals range from individuals that might have a grudge and are wanting either personally identifiable information or money, or criminal gangs, and they can be organised criminal gangs. Cyber criminals in general tend to be a bit noisier. They'll use things like ransomware and slightly more brazen phishing attempts and social engineering attempts to get what they want, although that's not always the case. They're largely motivated by money, and they're also looking for personally identifiable information that can be used to be sold on the dark web, and they'll use that information maybe as well to blackmail you or your customers, to steal identities or commit fraud and scams, as we're seeing at the moment. And often criminal gangs that are out there are contracted by governments to do the government's dirty work, so they also are state-sponsored actors, so it can actually be a little bit difficult sometimes to see who's doing the attacking. And the third type of criminal, cyber criminal that I'm going to talk today about is a hacktivist. And this is someone who's likely got a grudge against your organisation. It might be a disgruntled employee, a competitor, somebody who just wants to be annoying. And they're more likely to want to deface your website and disrupt your services rather than steal anything. That said, it still costs time and money to fix, and it's really difficult to put a price on the reputational damage that sort of attack can cause, and the loss of customers that you might suffer. So it's really important to remember in this space that no one is immune, because many cyber criminals nowadays are using automated attacks when they're attacking businesses, and especially in the small to medium business market, they make a really attractive target to attackers nowadays because they lack probably knowledge and some of the tooling our bigger guys have to protect their organisations, and they often have less funds available to spend on cyber security tooling to protect them. And the other thing that we've found in the work that we do is in New Zealand, there's quite a labour attitude towards cybercrime in general. We've found that customers think they're too far away for cyber attackers to worry about, or that they're too small and that no one wants to attack them. I've even been told that I've never been attacked by a customer because I have nothing of value that they want. That is not the case anymore. If you've got any personally identifiable information, attackers are going to want it. And by being connected to the internet, it makes us all vulnerable. It doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter where in the globe you are anymore. And for the next slide, I'm just going to get Jan to talk about the cybercrime economy for a little minute.
Sure. Yep. So this is a big economy. So people often say is when you said, "Oh, I've got nothing of value for the attackers." Well, actually, everyone does, because you've got your personally identifiable information. And what attackers can typically do with that is they can use it initially to try and steal funds out of your bank accounts, but also run up debt in your name. They will steal your identity. They can open Facebook accounts, but more importantly, they can actually start targeting your friends, family, customers, those sorts of people, just purely because they can pretend to be you and try and convince them to click on things that they shouldn't do. If they get hold of your email, they can see the sorts of things that you like and the sorts of activities that you undertake, and they can create very convincing attacks based on it. But the cyber economy is a real thing. So in the dark web, you can get all sorts of things. They have job boards, so you can get a job if you're an attacker. You can. They do attackers for hire. Quite often we see government state teams hiring criminal gangs to do some of their work. So often it's very hard to tell the difference between who's doing what, because the state sponsors are actually using criminal gangs and using their equipment to often launch attacks. One of the most important and worrying things that has happened since the start of the pandemic is that ransomware kits have become available on the dark web now. As the slide says, you can pay a bit of money up front, or you can work out some kind of agreement with the person that wrote the ransomware and agree to a split of the profits of any people that get ransomed. And then all you have to do is download this app onto your phone or your computer and literally press a couple of buttons and away you go, and it'll go and it'll ransom businesses all around the world where they have vulnerabilities or holes in their computer network that they can identify and get in. It's as simple as that. You don't need any kind of technology background. You don't have to be particularly technically apt. If you can run an app, you can run a ransomware kit. Other things I like to do, obviously, is use stolen username and password pairs. I don't know if you've been watching the news, but there's been a massive username password pair breach that's just been reported in the last couple of days. There's billions of passwords out there currently that have been stolen from various locations and then all put together in one big huge database. You can read about it on our website if you want to have a look at it later today, because we're about to launch a blog on it. But other things like spear phishing for hire, now that's when they target individuals in a specific organisation. They might look you up on social media. If it was me, they'd say, "Oh, she likes black Labradors," so they'll be sending me emails about black Labradors, and yeah, that would probably get me to click. So it is an economy. The attackers find it very lucrative. It's very low risk, and they get a high return from it. Very, very little chance of them getting caught. So it's really important to make sure that you're not in a position where they can get in and start using your information. So back over to you, Wendy.
Yep. Thanks, Jan. So back to Jan's point, all organisations have got data that cyber criminals want. They're financially motivated, or they're wanting personally identifiable information that they can use. So it's really important that you understand what you need to protect and what sensitive data sets that you've got within your organisations and where that information is stored, and to evaluate any potential harm it can cause to you or your customers if it was lost or stolen. And also understand that not necessarily all data sets need the same level of protection, but you really do need to understand what the most important is, and where you should be placing that investment in protecting your data. We'd also encourage you at Outfox to really only collect what you need, and maybe delete or even archive old data sets where you don't need that. We have seen customers that we work with have people in their supply chain, which I'll touch on very shortly, attacked, and they've lost a customer's data, and the customer is responsible for going back to get it. So the other thing that I would also point out, just when it comes to data, before I launch into this slide too much, is that in New Zealand you face a $10,000 fine with the Privacy Commissioner if you are to lose or have stolen customers' data, or even staff data if it's personal data, and you need to let all those customers know that you've lost their data. And it takes time, effort and money to do those things, and sometimes you'll find that it takes longer and it's harder than what you expect. So just turning back to the 3 focus areas that you're seeing on screen in front of you, just a question for you is how cyber resilient do you actually think that your own organisation is, and how do you think that you might be able to improve it? So at Outfox, we look at 3 key areas because they work together effectively, and it's people, process and technology. So I'm going to divide it up into the 3 areas. When it comes to people, we want to make sure that protecting your organisation from a cyber attack, it's the responsibility of not just the IT staff, but the entire organisation. Nowadays, 90% of cyber attacks still happen by the human factor. It's still staff, contractors, or ourselves even, as Jan said, almost clicking on black Labradors, clicking on things that we shouldn't. So we suggest that you train your staff regularly, help them to be able to detect things like phishing emails, social engineering attempts that might be had on their organisation, strong, long, unique passwords, MFA, all that good basic stuff that they need. And also ensure that no matter what level of the organisation that you're in, that your leadership teams and that your senior leadership teams and board members are educated on cybersecurity risks that might be within your organisation by informing them, and understand that they should be discussing it on a regular basis. When it comes to process, we would advise you that you need to be reviewing the policies and processes that you have in place regularly, that they're fit for purpose, and that they enable a really positive cyber resilience culture within your organisation, not that they're just put in a drawer and not looked at for the next 7 years. Everybody should know what they're doing and be able to understand what's in those policies and be able to adhere to them. We want you to be prepared, and by being prepared, you need an up-to-date incident response plan. Now, I'd probably ask some questions and get you to ask yourself some questions. Do you know where your organisation's incident response plan is? Has it been tested recently? Are you even part of an incident response team? And if you've got to ask yourself those questions, it's likely that your organisation is probably underprepared if they were to suffer from a cyber attack. And when it comes to processes, ask yourself things like, do you have the right processes in place to stop the likes of your finance people from being tricked or fooled into paying money out to attackers instead of, your legitimate vendors or customers? And when it comes to technology, we would be telling you that you need your tools to be fit for purpose when it comes to your security settings, to be protecting the things that you value most. And I know that Entelar and Cisco can help you with a whole lot of tooling that they've got in that space. There's no point having security software that isn't got the right things configured or turned on in an environment or isn't being updated. And I'd point out that no one piece of software on its own and across people, process and technology has stopped a cyber attack. So it takes all 3 of those things in unison to help prevent them and to have strong cyber resilience. Jan, next slide, please. So I touched on the importance of being cyber resilient throughout the supply chain and with your vendors. So nowadays there's also all kinds of software and applications that we open our systems up to, and that provides more external touch points for cyber criminals just to try and break in. So if any of the software and applications you're using on your system was compromised or have vulnerabilities, it can put your organisation at risk. You might be targeted by an attack where your organisation is used to deliver an attack to an organisation that you're supplying, or vice versa. Suppliers might be used to deliver an attack on you. If you're sharing valuable and sensitive information with suppliers, ensure that they can demonstrate that they've got a good level of security in place, so that they can protect your data the same way as what you'd expect it to. And we've found that an increasing number of supplier and contract agreements now include specific clauses directly around data-related protection, especially any government contracts that might be in place. Security needs to be built into agreements from the start where possible, and that can help protect the needs and the data needs from both sides, from that of you and your suppliers. And you're well within your rights to carry out due diligence around what security settings suppliers have in place. Now, people say, Wendy, it's hard to do that with big vendors, so you can talk to account managers, check their websites, seek assurance and ask for evidence. And by seeking assurance and asking for evidence, you can do that through auditing and getting them to test their systems, or seeing if they've got adherence to certain government standards, that international standards or government standards that are in place. And if a supplier loses your customer data, it's your responsibility to go and let your customers know that it's been lost. And the Privacy Commissioner, it's not up to them to deal with that. So you need to consider the implications also of what would happen if a supplier was to be attacked and you can't get to your information or can't serve your customers. Even with good security controls in place, do you know if you were to be attacked, what they're responsible for doing in that space, what your organisation is responsible for doing versus them? They're not going to contact your customers, and they're not going to contact the Privacy Commissioner. There's a shared responsibility model that sits there, and you need to know what you're responsible for and what you're not responsible for. So it's worth adding those types of clauses into your agreement. Jan, next slide, please. And companies that have got strong cyber resilience know where their gaps are, and they're taking active steps to improve them. And there's continuous improvement, right? So we say in our world that cybersecurity is no longer a nice to have. It's a case of if you're attacked, not when. And it's not something, back to Jan's point, that you can set and forget. Cyber resilience, is something where you've got to have it aligned with change within your organisation, because change can impact that cyber resilience space. Staff come and go, technologies change, they come and go, they get updated with major things sometimes. Cyber criminals are, we try to stay one step ahead of them in Outfox, but cyber criminals are always changing and becoming more sophisticated in what they do every day. And as new technologies come in, they're starting to use that in their tactics and attacking us. That also changes where the risks lie within your organisation. So no cyber risk is the same for 10 years. It changes over time and goes up and down as all those things change. So from our point of view, the key to staying one step ahead of cybercrime is to be prepared, and it's as simple as that. By being prepared means that you understand where your gaps and your risks are. You make sure that your people and your processes and technology is fit for purpose, and that everyone knows what they need to do. You know what you're trying to protect, and know if it's currently well protected or not, and that's your big data sets and personally identifiable information and that sensitive data that you're wanting to protect. And start with the simple things first, like training your teams and understanding where your gaps are, so that you can work your way up to the more expensive options if you're trying to make sure that you are investing in making your organisation cyber resilient. And I'd like to say that you can actually, if you are to be cyber attacked, that you can recover really quickly with your reputation intact and your customer base still intact, if you're willing to buy into a new way of thinking of being cyber resilient and being proactive and prepared when it comes to putting the right things in place. And with that, I'm going to hand back over to Anjo, I believe. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy and Jan, for that. we'll ask some of the questions later in the session. We'll hand over to Corien now the floor, but before that, let me just introduce Corien Vermaak. So Corien Vermaak is the Director of Cybersecurity at Cisco Australia and New Zealand. Corien started her career as a technology law specialist within the telecommunications space and soon fell in love with data privacy and the legal structures governing cybercrime. In her career, Corien specialized in cybercrime legislation and data privacy while representing large multinationals on these matters. She holds a master's degree in law specializing in cybercrime and data privacy. She has been involved in writing of legislation in this regard, as well as consulting to Africa Union and Interpol on issues relating to cybercrimes and privacy. Corien is a qualified digital forensics auditor, lead ISO 27001 auditor, and CISO. Corien has been a CISO advisor for the Cisco Security Center of Excellence in the Asia Pacific, Japan, and Greater China region, where she has led market leadership projects. She has used her lab and investigative experience to instruct and develop training focused on educating children on the dangers in the digital world. She has been running a pro bono campaign educating over 52,000 children on cyberbullying and digital privacy. In 2022, Corien released her book, Hacker Mom, The Practical Guide to Keeping Your Kids Safe Online. And Corien is one of the global heads of Cisco Women in Cybersecurity and has been both an executive and non-executive board member of Women in ICT. And yeah, she is currently the Director of Cybersecurity of Australia and New Zealand. So yeah, please welcome Corien. Corien, I'll give the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Anjo. That's quite a mouthful. I wasn't myself emotionally prepared for you to read my bio. Let's jump into it. Hello, everybody. I'm tremendously humbled to present to everybody today, and I think it's so poignant to follow on from the ladies that have just spoken, because a lot of our messages are in sync. So I thought I'll take just a pause moment to show some of the trends that we're seeing come up across technology, but really showing how cybersecurity has become some of those leading trends. Now, these are the Gartner trends that are published on an annual basis around what are they seeing becoming the mega drivers within the industry of technology. Top of that is AI risk, continuous threat management. So we've, as an industry, realized that we really need to respond to threats better. But I'm not going to go through all of them. I want to focus around the 10th one that sort of encapsulates all of these mega trends. And that's a concept called machine customers. Now, it's really interesting because when I quiz audiences on this, they sort of taken aback and nobody wants to raise a hand as to what is a machine customer. Over the last 18 months, we've seen the true democratization of AI. And through this, the machine really becomes the middleman. So us that have our own systems and our own web presences now are being quizzed by machines. And a great example of this is where, a year ago, you would plan a trip between two major cities by Googling accommodation and looking at the route that you want to travel and looking at Google Maps and really mapping how you want to do this road trip. Now you just go into a platform like TripAdvisor through Copilot and you just say, plan me a trip between these two cities for this amount of time, and I'd like to stay in Airbnbs, or I like camping. And the system that has become the machine customer pumps out the result for you. And what is done in the background is it quizzes all of these websites. So it's a tremendous time to be in security and to be in technology. But let's focus on what we're discussing today. Through my presentation, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to talk about how do we defend, because we really have to focus on that, moving from defense into resilience. And it is an absolute change of a mindset. Now, if we look at how we defend, there's a series of frameworks that we as an industry has really focused on in terms of understanding what we call the kill chain. Now, for some of you, if you've been in cybersecurity as long as I have, we still refer to the Lockheed Martin kill chain, which was one of the first reiterations of this. but it really looks at some of the concepts that the ladies have just spoken about as well. Reconnaissance, all of these personal data that's out there gives a great profile of who we are and what we do on a day-to-day basis, and that gives attackers a good way of delivering their content to us. So a great example, again tying on with the previous presenters, is if you are a financial ops lead and the perpetrators has got a good sense that you'll be the person paying the invoices, a great example of an attack through reconnaissance is to email you and say that, you know, the payment details on this invoice has changed and they would love for you to make the payment on the next cycle into the new payment details. And that's really when you click on the new invoice and, you know, a lot of things can happen through just that interaction, and it all starts with that reconnaissance element. Now, if we look at the kill chain, it talks about that preparation stage, the intrusion stage, and then the breach stage. Now, it is critical that we understand this because this is really how we bolster our security, is how do we prepare, how do we block that intrusion, and then how do we ultimately know and look or stop the breach. Now, again, the previous lady spoke about it a lot, but we are seeing that these attacks are, yes, absolutely white-collar criminals, but what we are also seeing is that the data that they steal gets disseminated into small packages. This specific case, this youngster paid for 5,000 records of the Optus breach, $200 on the dark web. So they didn't even get the whole data set. They only got a subset of that. And they only also got 3 data fields, which was name, surname, and mobile number. So the data that gets stolen gets disseminated. And that's why we're seeing all of these attacks from the post office to DHL to the tax office. Everybody is wanting to get in contact with us to try and get some money out of it. The reality is that a lot of these attacks are still facilitated through credential theft. Unfortunately, our users do not have the resilience to have multiple strong passwords, complex and unique for every login. Therefore, many passwords are reused, and that credential theft really leaves us exposed. And absolutely, we are seeing that human error are on the rise. You know, people are fatigued. Even when we deploy technology like multi-factor authentication, do we see that the continuous bombardment by a multi-factor auth process of a user will get them to click through at some stage because they truly just are fatigued at all the messages coming at them. So we're seeing that human error is tremendously on the rise over the last few years. So where do we start? Remember, I said the first part of my presentation, I was going to be focusing on how do we just stop that attack? How do we get our posture better? And we really have to simplify a lot of what we're doing at the moment. First, we need to look at locking out. Now, ultimately, we need to lock out the perpetrator. I just want to quickly see that these pop-ups stop. We need to lock out. We need to have the ability to stop the escalation. And ultimately, if our systems, as Jan mentioned, if the perpetrator is in on our systems and they're lurking on the inside, either on our mail service or inside our network, we need to stop them from calling back home and making that command and control establishment so that they can further their attack through this mechanism. Now, this is critical before we look to how do we recover. Resiliency, and that is what we're actually speaking about today, talks about the recovery process. And before we have those basics in place, we can't really get to a position where we say, okay, now we're going to roll back to a clean image of our data, or now we're going to re-image the machine that has been compromised with a clean data set. We can't do that if we can't block that basic early phases of the attack. Cyber resilience as a framework is really a circular system where it goes around from your culture to your regulation to establishing some of these controls and continuously checking our homework by re-engineering and improving some of our processes. But I want to go back to that kill chain because What do we do in that preparation phase? The preparation phase is when they do reconnaissance and when weaponization is delivered. How is that done? Mainly through email. So in that first phase of the attack, we need to focus on bolstering our email security. Ensure that we have a mature email practice that filters out gray mail, that looks at URLs, that looks at attachments, and has the capability to sandbox those attachments when they are seemingly malicious. There's a lot of maturity done within our mail capability. At this stage, we also really have to focus on how do we lock out perpetrators by authenticating the user are who they say they are. Because if that reconnaissance and weaponization then happens, it allows us to lock the perpetrator out really early. We then go into that intrusion phase. And if our multi-factor authentication or our authentication process is robust, we continuously verify that identity throughout everything that the user does. And that allows them to have a no intrusion or blockage to get access to other systems. What could those other systems be? Payroll. An invoicing, a SAP database where we store the details of our suppliers. Why do we not want that? Because ultimately it goes back to that reconnaissance phase. On the next email, they impersonate a supplier with a wrongful payment address, and they really have an opportunity for that unexpected financial operator to click on that invoice and make the payment incorrectly. And then lastly, in that breach phase, we need to stop them from calling home. And how do we do that? We apply secure internet gateways where we block and inspect that internet traffic to ensure that nobody gets to call home. And that's a really, really simplistic view of some of the basic hygiene measures that we have to put in place to better our posture in protecting very pragmatically against how the kill chain plays out. But we want to be able to get to the place of resilience, and this is not without issues. Each of our environments are unique. Some of us have legacy technology that is really hard to patch. Some of us have old machines, and some of us even have, as mentioned previously, contractors and people that work on a non-permanency basis that have their own devices. Back in my day, we used to call it bring your own disaster. So in that, we really look at fighting this massive talent shortage that has become the reality of our industry. And we are truly battling to fill all the positions within our organization. Then we pivot over to how do we prioritize and identify all of these incidents across the complexity of what we do within technology. And ultimately, all of our tools now claim to have advanced features. How do I use those to the best of my ability? So we've almost become, enemies onto ourselves by the complexity that we've created in cybersecurity. So I always remind people and say, would we fly this? And as I've spoken to one of the CISOs most recently, he said, Corien, this looks just like my operations. The only difference is there's still an analyst riveting some stuff on that plane wing, standing in flight, trying to build it as we fly. And that really has become the reality of what we try and do. Within Cisco, we have made a concerted effort to acquire some of the leading technologies in these disciplines over the last number of years. And we really try and bring this together and simplify it for our customers as we deliver more technologies. We focus in how we deliver technology around 3 critical use cases. They are quite easy to understand. How do I protect my user? Everybody accesses my network and what they need for their day job through a device and an identity. How do I protect that? That is a discipline that can go quite deep, but we need to focus on how do I protect the user. The second use case that we focus on is how do I protect the cloud and how my users access software as a service, a multitude of public and private cloud instances, and at the same time ensure that every user only has access to what they need access to. And once I have those 2 use cases in place, I need to look at How do I look at breach protection across my environment? How do I really reduce my mean time to respond, and give my people the ability to identify these threats and respond to them? All of this is still underpinned by what we have traditionally done in the perimeter, the firewall and the network. If we think of the network as a sensor, it technically sees all the information flows. So it's critical that we understand that we can't see security by itself. It's made up and transverses the network in a very mature way. We then, as maturity grows, want to layer in threat intelligence. Cisco boasts that we have a team called Talos, and as a non-native English speaker, I always say I only get one stab at this sentence, but Talos is the single largest non-governmental threat hunting organization in the world. And ultimately, we want to have the ability to deliver this seamlessly through a cloud interaction, as software is tremendously growing and easier to consume for clients. But this modern connected world is not without complexities. I very simplistically showed how we protect that we want to protect the user, the cloud, and respond to breaches quickly. But when we look at the reality of it, it's actually quite complex. We've got devices everywhere, from vending machines ordering their own inventory to coffee machines connecting to have milk replenished. And then we have all of the users and offices and branches. That goes through a series of access networks and quite possibly the internet as a service at certain instances. And it connects to cloud infrastructure and quite possibly to apps, whether those are on-prem, in the cloud, or as a software solution. This slide is quite clear that we're not making the road for ourselves very easy. 76% of companies cite that remote logins are a big threat to them. The main reasons for this is because we now have work from everywhere, where we have unsecured Wi-Fi networks across where our employees want to connect. We have the inability to monitor some of these threats across a multitude of networks. And then, we have the reality of a lot of our users accessing some of these work environments through unmanaged devices. And that really just means that we've got this growing attack vector that is opened up because of the world that we currently find ourselves in. And as it is really exciting to be part of this machine learning, AI-driven world at the moment, it also is tremendously complex in how we secure it. So the way we look at this, and this is actually part of a study that we've recently done, and I would invite everybody, Anjo, I'll send you the link, because you can actually do this readiness assessment for your own organization and get a report at the end. This was a study that we conducted, and it's changed over the last year, where we look at how do we intelligently look at the identity. We critically look at the identity through a multitude of intelligence. How do we trust the machines that access our networks and our artifacts? How do we build resilience in the network? How do we enforce that through our cloud instances? And now, as of recently, how do we fortify with and against AI? And why do I say with and against? We have the opportunity to use AI to fortify some of our posture, but we also have the opportunity to now protect that our data doesn't leak through AI, and it's critical that we do that. So let's look at how do we measure this readiness. Wendy so eloquently spoke about the people, the process, and the technology. To be able to deliver all 5, 6 of those pillars, you need to have the people, the process, and their technology. And if you've done nothing, you would find yourself in that beginner phase. If you've made a noble attempt to understand what you need to do, you are absolutely in the formative phase. If you've kicked off projects to really start maturing some of these capabilities, you would find yourself in that progressive phase. And if you think you've got most of it under the belt and you score around 70% on those measurable outputs, we would classify you as in the mature phase. But what is very interesting, and I'm very certain of time because I want to be able to answer some questions, is that this has changed. Look at last year. Last year, 15% of organizations that we measured was in the mature phase, where this year, because of the layering in of AI, only 3% are now mature. Shows you how quickly the industry is changing and how rapidly we have to evolve and stay abreast of things. What is also quite positive is that a big part of our organizations are saying they are in that formative, which really leans into the fact that they know what they need to do. They're trying their best to try and get the budget, get the people, get the processes formulated so that they can kick off projects to try and mature their posture. Now, I always pause with this moment because how we've traditionally done security is not quite how we are able to protect against the sophisticated adversaries that we see at the moment. I want to close off with a little bit of a brag slide around where Cisco is some of the market leaders. What people aren't that very well aware of is that we are actually the market leader from a zero trust security, which is that least privilege component that I spoke about, as well as cloud and network edge security. And as you all know, we have been the routing and switching company for as long as literally I have been alive. So I'm going to close out with a comment from our CEO. We have the security intelligence that people don't have, and we have the applications performance monitoring capability that other people don't have. We see trillions of threats on a daily basis. And if you think about it, 85% of the global internet traffic touches a Cisco device somewhere in the transaction, which means we are at the front foot of seeing how information is shared across the world, and therefore we have this deep-rooted intelligence and build that into our technology to ensure that everybody is safe. I hope this was valuable and insightful, and I want to ensure that we have 2 minutes for questions. Anjo, over to you.
Thanks, Corien, for that wonderful presentation. It was really insightful, just like Wendy and Jan's presentation. One of the things that I've I wanted to highlight that I find really interesting in the Outfox presentation was the 10,000 fine if you lose a customer's staff data. In enterprise businesses, that might not be like too much, but for SMB, which is majority of businesses here in New Zealand, that's quite a lot of money. And that security assessment that Corien have shared, that's a really good tool that our IT partners here attending our webinar could use to ask those to their customers and might be able to help them get those opportunities, identify those opportunities. Any questions from our attendees here? I hope you find it really insightful, this session. One question that I have here is might be for Outfox. Do we see a growth in cyber attack to small businesses here in New Zealand in the recent year, or do we have do you guys have any data of how much growth are we getting? Because majority of our customers here are small and medium businesses, right? So
yeah, so CERT New Zealand, the Computer Emergency Response Team, they put out reports annually on how many attacks they've seen, and it's roughly around 8,000 attacks every year, and it is slowly increasing from their point of view. However, they only report on attacks that get reported to them, and there's a lot of small to medium-sized businesses that actually don't know that CERT exists. So what they're seeing is only a small component of what's actually going on. So just from our own perspectives, working with our customers, yeah, we've seen a lot more attacks than we've seen in previous years.
awesome. Thanks for that. Any other questions in our chat box? Feel free to send it. We have here from Stuart. Do you have a breakdown in data to demonstrate the type of attacks here in New Zealand? Example, ransomware, DDoS, etc.
Is that for us or for?
Yes.
Yeah.
Whoever has the data.
I can step in here and just comment. Generally, the data regulator would keep this, and your statistical bureau will publish this based on the disclosures. So these are all, creative bookkeeping numbers, and I say that with a great deal of respect. Even I quote the FBI all the time as well, but they can only report what is disclosed to them. But it is a good sense There's also a lot of industry reports. So some of the good industry, all of the vendors do research with this regard. Our own is the Talos blog, obviously. And that is showing some of the global data. And a great example out of that is, for instance, that healthcare attacks are on the rise again. We saw it in 2018 and then again in 2018 to 19. Then healthcare slowed down a little bit. Education was the most attacked vector, and now healthcare is back. So it's really interesting how these things evolve. So yes, but I would advise that you look at your local cyber governance team, as well as your Bureau of Statistics, as they do publish this specifically relating to New Zealand. Ladies, have I lost it?
Yeah, so it is mainly search again. So search and National Cybersecurity Centre that do publish, and they do provide a breakdown of the attacks that they're seeing. And what they're seeing over here is that frauds and scams are on the increase, and they're exponentially. But again, as we said before, it's only the information that's being reported to them. So you've got to kind of take it with a grain of salt, because not all attacks are being reported. It's not mandatory in New Zealand to report attacks, unfortunately. Hopefully that will change in the future.
Well, thanks for that. Any other question before we end the session? I know it's over time, or 2 minutes over the time, but any last question? Good. Cool. I guess we can end it now. Ladies, thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. To everyone who attended this, I hope you really find it insightful, and you'll be able to use all of the learnings in this session in those conversations that you'll be having with your customers. And hopefully that would lead to them being more open in listening to you, and listening to what you can provide them in solution. We're all here. If you need anything, if you have any questions, feel free to email us. Jan, Wendy, Corien, thank you so much for your time. And yeah, hope to meet you all again soon, maybe in person. And yeah, until next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Bye.